Here with us is Michael Kharfen from the DC Department of Public Health, along with Eric Silverberg, the founder and CEO of the dating app Scruff. Please welcome back the Atlantic's Alex Wagner.
Gentlemen, let's just get right to the heart of the matter, which is HIV and AIDS. And where you see the landscape now. I'll start with you first, Michael. PrEP. How has it changed the HIV positive community and even not the HIV positive community in Washington, D.C.?
Well, the first thing about PrEP to me is that this is, and I've been working on HIV since 1985. I started in New York City. And this is the first new prevention strategy that we've had for HIV since the beginning of the epidemic. So we've only had before the use of condoms to prevent sexual transmission of HIV, and we've had sharing of clean needles to prevent for injection drug use, but that's it. Other than abstinence, which is not really practical. So for us, in terms of really making a game changer as to prevention of HIV, PrEP gives us a whole new outlook and a whole new opportunity to both inform people about HIV and health, connect them to their healthcare providers, because they do have to see a medical provider to get PrEP, but then also to empower them about their own health and have healthy sexual life choices.
Eric, you guys, Scruff is taking the world by storm. You have sexual safety preferences.
We do.
Tell us a little bit about how that has, how you've seen that change the sort of dating landscape.
Sure. We early on noticed that in their profiles and profiles that people were creating on our app, they would indicate their HIV status in their profile name, as well as in the free text fields that we include. Many people would describe their sexual health and safety practices. And with the advent of PrEP, we knew we wanted to get out in front of this and give people a way to communicate these practices in a way that was that helped encourage safer sex practices without being either inaccurate or without making it seem like we were the no fun police, if you will. And it's a very delicate balance, and there were a lot of
to the no fun piece. You think people don't want to talk about their sexual health when they're trying to hook up? Is that basically the?
It's a very difficult conversation. I think everyone here, I think we can all acknowledge it is a very difficult conversation. And if you are heavy-handed and perhaps too moralistic, you can shut down a conversation that otherwise really does need to happen. And so it was about a little over a year ago, that we introduced in our app the ability to indicate from an enumerated list what your safety practices were, and that included PrEP.
So Michael, PrEP for people who aren't familiar with it, you have to take it every day.
Yes, that's the recommendation.
And human beings are often lax in their habits. To what degree is it a concern that people aren't being as vigilant or careful as they need to be, as diligent about taking the medication, and that will either dilute its efficacy or potentially create a drug-resistant strain?
So those are really good questions and really good issues that we're just learning more about as we try to scale up and make more people choose that as an option, because we really want people to explore their options. Human beings don't just like to say this is the only way you can do something as to have a healthy sex life.
Right.
And what we do know, and this is just the reality of, is that people don't always use condoms. Even though they are a proven method to prevent HIV, people don't always use them. Or, as Eric was alluding to, something like when you're in the middle of the moment, condom interruptus is not a great way to keep the mood going.
I was not familiar with the Latin condom interruptus.
There is a Latin terminology for it. So the notion that, as well as, quite frankly, some of the things that we know that aren't accurate, which is where people are trying to make choices about whether or not they know their partner's status or whether or not they're choosing their partner based on that status, knowing that they're somehow making what we call the sero sorting. They say, okay, well, I know that this person's HIV negative, so I can have sex with that person because I'm HIV negative, or vice versa, the person's HIV positive. And when we've looked at that in different studies, people have been wrong almost all the time. So PrEP gives someone that option to sometimes not necessarily have make that wrong choice. And so where we are right now is we do have our guidance that this has to be taken on a daily basis, and that's what we're trying to promote for people, to know that this is the same way that some people take cholesterol medication every day.
Or birth control.
Or birth control. In fact, some people are calling PrEP the birth control for HIV. So to get into that habit, but we know that people aren't always consistent with it. But I think the other message about PrEP, just like, say, birth control, is that you're not necessarily taking this for the rest of your life. You're taking this for a period of your time. So you make a plan for yourself. This is when I'm going to be more sexually active. This is when I'm going to engage in a lot of partners. This is when I'm going to use Scruff a lot more often. And then, and so for that period of time, I'm going to be on PrEP, and that's when I'm going to do that. And then things change in my life.
So you're betting on ultimate monogamy at some point.
Well,
or something like it.
I think that that people come to different stages in their life, and we need to think about people having those kinds of choices and exploring their options, and which is one of the themes of our PrEP campaign, is explore your options, and to be able to say that these episodes and a part of your life are a natural part of the sort of continuum of one's sexual life.
But you're not worried. I mean, because just again from a public health perspective, you're not worried about people kind of going on, going off, not taking the pills as often as they should, and creating a more resistant strain.
So we do have that concern. I'm not gonna dismiss it as a concern. We do want people to follow the guidance with it, and so setting up a reasonable and practical approach to PrEP is going to be more successful than being random about it. And we're certainly not suggesting that you use PrEP on an intermittent basis. We're learning more as the intervention or as the opportunity for this prevention takes place, as to whether or not there may be 1 or 2 days during the week, if you don't take it, that there still is a protective level there. So far in all of the studies associated with PrEP, there hasn't been resistance that has been found in terms of the use of the medication. And obviously, for people to know, this is for persons who are HIV negative.
Right.
Because this is an HIV medication that we use also for treatment. So the first test is always to know whether or not you're HIV negative, and you have to confirm that first before you choose to use PrEP.
Eric, when you started the sort of section that allowed people to designate their sexual safety preferences, were you concerned about stigmatizing people who have HIV?
So HIV stigma is definitely a concern that we think very, very deeply about. It was also a source of great internal debate, and I think we probably spent over a year trying to figure out how to properly include this detail in our app, in your profile, because again, it's possible to be inaccurate and give people, especially on a dating profile, a false sense of certainty. You know, his profile said negative, so we had unprotected sex. I just turned what happened? And we elected to create what we've called a community, and we have a number of communities, different interest groups, different types. We created a community called Pause. So on our app, you
Pause,
can
P-O-S.
P-O-Z, yeah,
P-O-Z.
P-O-Z. So you can indicate that you are part of or interested in the Pause community, but there's not the reverse, right? It's not, we didn't make it such that you can, there's no way to search profiles that say HIV negative, for example, because we wanted to not create stigma, but allow people who wanted to share this detail to do so, and create space for that community of HIV positive gay men who we know want to connect on our app.
I mean, that's the whole question of filters. And I know you guys there was some controversy because people at one point could filter for race on the site, right? The question is, how do you allow users to sort preferentially without creating or reinforcing bias, right?
No, absolutely. And that's why, I think the more education that we can do, and by bringing, for example, the pause community to the fore, safer sex practices to the fore, we can make this a less fearful, more understood, and more accepted part of the gay community and the world at large.
So, Michael, I mean, if you're thinking about this in a broader analog, it's like flu shot, right? What's the argument against getting a flu shot? What's the argument against going on PrEP? When you hear it, how do you rebut it?
Well,
and what is it?
Well, first, I don't think that PrEP is for everybody. I mean, it's for some people, and some people are going to find that this is what they feel is most comfortable and fits for their lifestyle and for them to practice safe sex. For others, it's not going to be right. They don't feel like taking a pill every single day for something that they don't have. And we have to also understand that for people to know that taking this medication does not have significant side effects to it. It's not going to change your other aspects of your health. It's just going to protect you against HIV. So it's not going to protect you against other STDs, such as chlamydia, gonorrhea, or syphilis, but those we can cure. HIV, there is no cure. And so the opportunity to say that that the argument against PrEP, and there are some that have a discomfort with it, and some within the gay and lesbian community, or some that have associated stigma with it. Some calling it, your Truvada whore is one of the terms that has surfaced around this.
That's the Latin term.
It's right. So but I also feel that's. I think there's another way to approach this, which is really an affirming way that PrEP can be an empowering tool for people. One of the things that we find challenging right now is to actually make this equitable for people, because right now
that was my second
majority of users are basically white gay men. And we have here in DC in particular, 75% of our population that have HIV are African American. The leading population group that's getting HIV here are African American men who have sex with men. We have also a growing number of HIV cases among Latino men. And so we've not necessarily made this equally available.
What is the biggest hurdle? Is it cultural, societal, cost? Where's the challenge?
I think there are combinations. I think there are some that are just because we haven't really reached out to those communities extensively, and that's something that we're trying to do here in DC, where we brought on different community partners. We're reaching out to medical providers. We've engaged peers. We have a whole new group of African American and Latino gay men who are helping us, and transgender women who are helping us be able to educate within the community, because word of mouth is an important thing. And also for people to know, which is a great thing about what Scruff is doing, is that people are affirming that they're using PrEP, because a lot of what anybody's choice is to say, well, I know somebody, or I've heard of somebody that uses it. So there is somewhat of a grassroots kind of effort here. We can advertise, of which we have done on Scruff, but more what we need to do is to get more community engagement and people to understand and ask questions as to what this means for their life, and an empowering tool.
Eric, how have you seen interactions change online from your users?
Well, we've seen just a tremendous uptake since we introduced the safer sex practices. We've seen a real big uptake in this feature in people who've added it to their profiles. We just pulled some statistics just before coming here, and in the cities throughout the United States with the highest rate of profiles indicating that PrEP is part of their safer sex practices, we're seeing upwards of 20% of profiles online in the last 30 days, including that So, that's just, it's a really encouraging sign. And I think speaks to the good work that, that you all have done in getting the word out. There's obviously there's still a lot to go. At the bottom of the list, only like 2 to 3% of profiles indicating it's one of their safer sex practices. But to think that a little over a year ago, none of that was
even on the radar.
On the radar, yeah, I think that's a big victory and one that we should acknowledge.
We have time for a couple questions if you want to raise your hand. There are traveling mics in the audience.
So thank you.
Cool. Okay.
I guess I have a question about in terms of the way PrEP is marketed, because I know that among particularly white gay men, kind of the elephant in the room that we're not talking about is Truvada. Doctors are saying to use with condoms, and a lot of people are engaging in condomless sex or barebacking. And I just wondered, how do we have that conversation and acknowledge that that's happening, but at the same time, talk about other STDs?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the opportunities in PrEP, which is to have those kinds of conversations, because we haven't really had those conversations. And in fact, I think we've gotten farther away from it in HIV strategies. And PrEP being new in itself is a way to start having that conversation and having a healthy conversation about sex. What is your preference? What makes you feel comfortable, and what is healthy for you? So in making those kinds of choices. So I think the advantage of this of having PrEP is to have more of that conversation, folks.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a grad student from George Washington University. What work is being done to promote PrEP in other communities like the BDSM community or the swinger community, which are lots of sex, lots of different partners that may benefit from this kind of preventative and progressive medication, but don't seem to be part of the public dialogue?
Well, I think one of the approaches that we're trying to do is to understand different social networks of how people get to know each other, and how that is part of their sexual life choices. And sometimes in some settings, that's not the place that you can necessarily have that type of conversation. And so, we've tried that in other different approaches in some of our community partners, whether we're doing testing in different clubs or certainly passing out condoms in different clubs has been a successful strategy in some regards. This one is a little bit more of an in-depth conversation, but that said, I think the opportunities through using social media, through using the other methods of way people get to connect with each other, and definitely by recruiting folks who are willing to be champions for this within those communities, to be able to, we connected with through our condom program. We have a very robust condom distribution program around connecting with people who have house parties. So the person who's hosting the party, we've said, come on down, come and pick up as many different condoms as you want from us. So this is an opportunity for us to have that kind of conversation with some of those folks that are hosting some of these opportunities.
Free condoms, where do they have to go?
We even send condoms to your home or wherever place you'd like to. Here in DC, we send you 10 free condoms and 10 packets of lube.
Do you need to pass a requirement, or can
No.
anybody just you don't have to prove that you have raging house parties? You can just trust me on this one.
We trust you, your family members, friends, coworkers. Just go to dctakesonhiv.com and then find out we can send you free condoms.
Okay, cool. One more question.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm here with Sojourners. I have a question. Do you have any data on the breakdown of age-wise, so generationally, how AIDS rates, have they been declining with younger generations? Have they been going up? Do you have any data on that?
Let me ask you also, Eric, because I know you guys have more data. From the pause community, is there a profile? Is that a younger, older group compared to the average Scruff
We'd have to double check. I believe the last time we ran it, it definitely skewed older. I know your question was about age, but just another data point to throw into the mix. When we looked at PrEP, self-reported PrEP usage, the stats that I just quoted, we were expecting to see much more skew ethnically. But we did not. There wasn't a lot of variation based on ethnicity.
Interesting.
So geography was the big, a lot of variation there, but not so much by ethnicity. But
so trend-wise, definitely it's skewing towards younger people. We've had in DC in particular an older epidemic in general, but what we're seeing now is that the proportion of new HIV cases are skewing to those in their 20s. And that is a trend that we're obviously highly concerned about. And then for particularly that where PrEP could be an opportunity for us to engage younger people and as well as another option for them. So we're definitely looking to skew somewhat younger because of the trends that we're seeing in new HIV diagnoses.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your work. Thank you guys all.
Thank you. Okay.